So let's chat. We have Sarah Perkins with us. She is our resident, well, maybe not resident because she's up north and we're down here, but she's the guru, I should say,
There
when
you
it
go.
comes to credit. Been doing this a day or two, huh, Sarah?
Yeah, just for a little bit now, going on about 20 years.
Started at 9.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So tell what's going on in the credit. What is, I mean, I see some things on social media and I don't quite believe them. So some of the things that are out there, I want you to be the one to dispel the myths, because if I say it, people say, "Oh, Ron, you don't know what you're talking about." But Sarah, you know what you're talking about. What's going on in some of these myths?
Oh, I know. I cringe. I think every time I open like TikTok or Instagram, everybody thinks they're a credit guru now, and it spreading a lot of false information. I would say probably one of the ones I've heard most recently is if a creditor sells your debt, you no longer owe that debt, so they can't collect, and tell them to kick rocks, and it's just backfiring on people because that is so not the case.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I heard that one, Sarah, and I couldn't believe. Okay, why? What is what are they claiming, and then what is the truth? I mean, they're saying that basically they're saying that the collection industry is non-existent or has no foundation anywhere. Is that kind of the thought process there?
I think the thought process behind it is now somebody else, a different corporation, owes your debt, owns it. And so because you didn't sign the contract with that particular company, you don't owe them the money. But unfortunately, they did. If they legally purchase the debt, you can do that from the banks, and they just have to adhere by the same contract guidelines that the bank had with you, and they can legally come after you to collect on that debt, sue on that debt, anything like they were the original bank, like Bank of America.
Now, do the same rules apply on that, Sarah? So if Mrs. Smith or Mr. Smith gets a call from a collection company, we've talked in the past that one of the issues is that they have to be able to furnish you the details of the debt or what the debt's all about, or a copy of the contract. Does that still apply, being that they didn't have the initial contract?
Yes, so they still have to adhere by all the same rules. You do have the ability to request a verification of that debt, where they simply have to supply who the original creditor was, the original account number, some balance details. Most of the time when the debt is sold to these companies, they will get a copy of the contract. I don't think they have to legally furnish that unless they bring it in front of a court of law, but they do have to send you a verification of debt response if you request that. Even within 30 days, I think, of them purchasing the debt, they have to let you know that they are the new owners of that debt.
Really? So they have to tell you that they own it?
Yes. So they're obviously going to go off of whatever the last information is that your creditor had. So if you were not keeping that information up to date, they can only go off of what, like I said, Bank of America had last on file. So if you've moved, it's ultimately your responsibility to keep your contact information up to date. So they'll send it out to wherever it was. So they've done their due diligence. But then once you hear about the debt, if you find out, you run your credit report and you're seeing something on there, you still have the right to ask for them to verify that debt and send it to you in writing.
So I've seen sometimes recently where somebody goes and they get a loan from XYZ company, and XYZ is now sold to ABC. The whole company, and you don't even really know it. It's businesses are sold, bought and sold all the time. And then now ABC is calling, and you have no clue what your debt, what they're even calling about. Are you able to ask them, hey, furnish me the details of what you want, or what this is all about?
Yes, you absolutely have that right. You might have to put it in writing, but they definitely do have to supply that information if you request it. It gets a little bit trickier when it's been beyond the 30 days since they first purchased the debt, but you still have the ability to ask and have them furnish that information for you.
Okay, so let's move on to another one here that I hear a lot, especially leading a lending team. An item's not on the credit report. Do I still owe it?
Yeah, so I've run into this quite a bit. Unfortunately, it's when people have probably worked with some other type of agency that tells them they get the debt removed from your credit report. They think they're home free and no longer owe the debt. So as long as there's a balance out there, you legally owe the debt. Just the type of ways that they can go and try to collect it can change based on the statute of limitations. So, like in California, there's a 4-year limit that they have to sue you on that debt. And then they can still report it on your credit report up to 7 years. But even after that 7 years, I had a client call me yesterday saying someone called him about a First Premier account now owned by like ABC Collections. He's like, Sarah, it's been over 7 years since I paid this. It's not on my credit report. What do I do? I don't understand. I said, well, if you never paid the debt, you actually still owe it, but they can't really do much to try to make you pay it. So if it's not on your credit report and past that statute of limitations, it's really up to you if you feel obligated that you want to repay it.
So then it becomes just a moral issue. Do I want to pay my debt, or don't I want to pay my debt?
Correct. And if you can't pay it in full, I really urge you probably not to pay it, because even if you make a payment of, say, $1, and I see this happen all the time where they get tricked into making a small payment to start a payment plan, you restart that clock for the statute of limitations to get sued. They can't necessarily report it on your credit report, but you are opening up the window to maybe a lawsuit if you fail to, stick with that payment plan.
Wow, that's an interesting one. So you've restarted the clock on statute of limitations just by trying to do something right.
Correct.
Okay, so what I want to find out from you is there a better way of dealing with that if you want to do that moral, pay the moral obligation? Is there a better way? I want to talk to you about that when we come back. Continuing our conversation, Sarah Perkins is with us. Blue Water Credit is the name of the company. Every once in a while, we do get comments that come across, and we like to throw them up on the screen. Wow, there's a big one. It blocks me out even. So how does Blue Water Credit comply with TSR guidelines? I don't even know what that is. That require that for-profit credit repair companies are forbidden from charging fees. Lexington Law, we all know, had a lot of problems. They got in trouble. And I can tell you this because of just talking to clients. Lexington Law's business model, in my opinion, was to grind out the consumer. Yeah, they're gonna try and deal with one or two items now because their business model was to charge you for a lifetime, right? They were going to get you on their $79, $89, $99 plan, whatever they charged. And there was a monthly subscription, so to speak. So they didn't have any incentive to get the job done. So how are you complying currently? This is the hottest topic in the credit repair industry. The CFPB and FTC are finding CFPB and the FTC have always been on credit repair, and I'm going to say for good cause. There's been a lot of credit companies out there that are not ethical companies. They're not out there doing the right thing. I'm going to have Sarah talk about this, but I'm going to share with you that I've never had anybody tell me that they were not ultra satisfied and really happy with the service they got at Blue Water Credit, because they kind of identify what someone's looking for. I've heard the people at Blue Water Credit sometimes say, we don't need to deal with all of this. We only need to deal with the items that get us to our goals. But Sarah, can you talk about this a little?
Yeah, so what Tiffany brought up is, a very valid point, and actually something I speak with lenders and real estate agents a lot about. And she is right. In our industry, we are not allowed, if you are doing things the right way, to collect any type of fees for services not rendered. And so how Blue Water Credit stays on top of this is we have to perform the service and then we bill in arrears. So we are a flat monthly fee, but we do the month of work and then charge for that month of work after the month is completed. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies out there that can't survive with that type of business model. And so they either go out of business or they're just operating illegally. I think 99% of the credit repair companies out there are just saying, you know what, we're just going to collect our fees. I hear people doing just a flat fee for a certain amount of service, like you pay $900 up front and we'll do all the work. Can't do that. So we always do a risk-free consultation and then we bill monthly for the work that we performed the month prior. And then we actually are the first credit repair company setting up escrow accounts for our out-of-state clients. So we're in California. So for anybody outside of California, their monthly funds will be put in an escrow account that we have no access to until the 6 months of their program has been completed. They're satisfied, and then we can actually collect those 6 months of fees. So we're all about staying on top of those kind of regulations because, like you said, they need to be out there because there's so many people that are, operating under not good faith.
Yeah, that's amazing how that's going on. And I know I've talked to the powers to be at Blue Water, and they're so on top of all of the different regulations that things that many people have never even heard of. And I don't know, they might, I don't know, you guys must be in with some trade groups or think tanks or something, because things that aren't even in the public knowledge, you guys are dealing with ahead of time. So it's kind of great to know that.
Yeah, Jeff, our owner, is actually on the board of a new, it's called Occam, and basically they're leading the way in compliance in our industry. So we are getting, all the information as far as how to stay compliant and making sure that we're doing that. Like we have to be registered with the DOJ. We have to have $100,000 surety bond. California has some of the strictest rules and guidelines that we have to follow. So we make sure we follow those in any states that we operate in.
So that's a good thought right there. A good bit of knowledge. If you're looking at getting credit repair, if you need some help getting your credit report corrected, just ask the company, hey, do you send me, I want a copy of your bond. Believe it or not, the bond is probably one of the most important items ever. Not that you really use it, but they're kind of a watchdog also to make sure that the companies operate properly, because if you have to have the bond and the bond company says we're not going to bond you and insure you anymore, you got some serious problems. But let's get back and talk more about some of the items that are on credit reports that we can deal with. Legitimate derogatory items, can those actually be removed?
Yeah, so I think it's a kind of a myth out there that the creditors had to have some kind of error and you made your payment on time, and if you just happen to slip up and miss it, that's something that can't be removed. And it's furthest from the truth. So with a credit report, the information reported, if it is inaccurate, incomplete, or erroneous, it has to be investigated. And if it can't be proven, it has to be removed. So errors happen all the time on reports, whether it be with the dates, with the amounts. And that is what our experts at Blue Water Credit are good at, is going through a credit report with a fine-tooth comb and looking for those kind of errors or inaccuracies, and then bringing upon the disputes with the creditors and the credit bureau. So looking for those violations and getting it removed because of it not being reported correctly.
And I would suggest or question the thought, Sarah, if the consumer, if you go through this and go through the process, and if a creditor says, something, I just don't want to deal with it. It's something that's old. It's a nuisance. I'm not going to confirm or deny. I'm just not going to respond to the bureau. Then what happens with that trade line?
Well, then it needs to be removed. And that's how we're able to get those type of items removed, when you have an expert that goes in and knows how to dispute those type of items, the right way, and so that they're permanently removed from your credit report. And yeah, you're right. When items are a certain of an age, or maybe you don't owe a balance anymore, they might be a little bit less likely to respond to those disputes, making it a little bit easier to get those older derogatories removed.
Okay, so we got a lot of stuff still to cover. Josh, I probably won't make it to our Your Credit Matters because we got our credit guru here with us. But I want to get to a couple other things. I do want to get back to my question for Sarah about the statute of limitations that we started talking about in the B block. So we're going to go back to that as well. Sarah Perkins is with us today from Blue Water Credit. We're just getting some education on credit, on your credit report. And I'm going to throw it out there right from the beginning, because there's a lot of people out there that I hear all the time. Well, I can just go and get my credit report and send a letter saying everything's not mine. What a bunch of hogwash. And that's not what our friends at Blue Water Credit do. But I want to go back to something we did talk about in the early segment and see if maybe I'm on a track here that Well, many times people say that I'm hallucinating, Sarah, but I'm going to see if this is accurate. So we were talking earlier about the statute of limitations, and I think you shared that California has a 4-year statute of limitations for filing a lawsuit on a debt, but that doesn't absolve you of the debt. Now, if somebody goes and they want to settle that, and I'm just going to throw out numbers, and I'm going to say, okay, you've got $1,000 debt, and you want to settle it for $250. Is there any way to protect yourself, number one, from restarting that statute of limitations, or to get that removed from your credit report?
So yeah, debt settlement is actually a super common thing, especially after a debt has been sold and that's older. So debt buyers will go out there and purchase these debts for pennies on the dollar. So if you feel a moral obligation to have to repay these debts, I would definitely say offer a settlement to these creditors. And as part of the settlement, try to negotiate that they delete from your credit report if it's still something that's reporting within that 7 years. Sometimes the creditors actually issue a 1099-C form and they'll just forgive the debt for a variety of reasons. So if you receive that 1099-C form from the creditor without paying anything, that would absolve you from having to repay the debt. But you don't see that happen very often, but I would definitely recommend settling and making sure you get that offer in writing. But again, if you make any kind of payment plan, like that settlement set up in multiple payments, and you default on that payment plan, you are restarting that statute of limitations for legal action. So be really careful when agreeing to anything in payments if you don't know if you might be able to fulfill it. So I would say do a one and done, like lump sum settlement. You'll probably get a better percentage off anyways doing it in a one-time payment. Plus it just saves you from restarting that clock if you get the right documentation saying that balance will be no longer owed after the settlement is completed.
So let's unpack a little bit of what you said there, Sarah. So you were saying that a collection company is buying the debt. So what that would mean to me, and you correct me, is say I've got, again, we go back to that $1,000 debt, and you said they're going to buy it, or they can buy it pennies on the dollar. So hypothetically, if they were to pay 20%, and is that a fair number? Do they usually pay more or less than that?
It probably just depends on they come over in portfolio, so it could be, judged on how old it is, if these people have assets, the type of debt it is. So, I mean, I would say probably around 20 to 30 cents on the dollar is probably going to be about average.
Okay, so let's just, because I want to do easy math because I'm a simple guy. Let's say they bought that $1,000 debt for $250. If I call and settle it, or if I hire Blue Water Credit to do the settlement work for me, and they go in there and they get it settled at $400, that's let's do $500. That's a fifth. They doubled their money. That's a good return on your investment.
Exactly. So yeah, they're taking a risk because these people have already defaulted on the accounts. When a debt buyer purchases the debt, typically it's already been 180 days past due. So they know the chances of recovering it, go way down after the creditor has written the debt off. So that's why they get it at such a discount. But they are hoping that it's going to pay off, that somebody's going to feel morally obligated, or they may initiate a lawsuit, and then that person's going to go out and try to find the money after that lawsuit's been initiated. So they'll try a variety of collection methods in order to try to entice people to pay, and use the settlement as a ploy as well too, to get people to pay.
Do you think, I know you've done that, you've got a lot of experience in this arena. Are they going to am I going to get as good a transaction or settlement as if I hired somebody to do it for me?
Well, the benefit that you get from hiring like a company like Blue Waters, myself, I've been around for 20 years doing this. So I built, a really good contact list with like all the major banks, credit buyers, and some of them have dedicated debt settlement departments that deal with our company, because they know that we're bringing them a volume of clients that are going to pay. And so because we're bringing them that volume instead of just being an individual, they are giving us, better discounts. And then we're more likely to pay. They know that the clients in our program are motivated to get these things done as opposed to just calling a consumer or having the consumer call in. They don't know the behavior of this consumer. They don't know if they're going to fulfill, whatever settlement offer is given to them. So there's a higher chance that the settlement will be completed with us, and we do the higher volume. So in a lot of cases, we can secure a better deal and even sometimes get those deletions without any kind of hardship application or going through all the motions that maybe a consumer would have to do on their own.
So you've got the experience in there. There's relationships. I'm assuming that the collection companies are going to feel, hey, these guys aren't going to be doing this if there's not a likelihood of success. So there's that level of due diligence in there as well.
Correct.
So here's one that always happens, and I get this on a regular basis. I try to dispel this myth as a consumer advocate because we offer a service called RSR Money. You go to rsrmoney.com and you can monitor your credit scores. But those are not going to be the same as what our friends at Geneva Financial will get when they pull a credit report. Can you explain why those are different?
Yeah, so in the credit world, there's two major brands of credit scores out there. So you have your FICO, which is probably still used in about 90% of lending decisions. And then you have your Vantage score. So Vantage was put together by the three bureaus to somewhat compete with the FICO score. So a lot of the online scores you get, like through Credit Karma and Credit Sesame, are looking at what's called a Vantage score. And although they look at similar components like your payment history, length of credit, your credit utilization, they put different weights on how important those different categories are, which can skew a score, 100 points one way or another. So most of the time I see the Vantage score probably be a little bit higher than a FICO score, but it can go the other way. And then within FICO itself, there's various versions. So there's a version that the lenders will use in the mortgage world, like the 5, 4, and 2 model, where that's probably not going to be the FICO score that's readily available in those monitoring services. Most likely they're giving you a very general FICO score, like the version 8, which has some different nuances on things that they don't count that, the mortgage score may count. So like paid collections, the general score doesn't even look at paid collections, where the mortgage one, you still get dinged for a paid collections.
So that's some good information. I was once told, and I don't know if it's still this case, Sarah, tell me if I'm right or wrong, that the easy way of understanding this is that, I think right now, Josh, I think we're on iOS 17 on Apple's or something like that. But there's still, the operating system 14 or 12. And that's kind of the same way that the FICO has. They keep doing these latest and greatest, but that doesn't mean everybody's using the latest and greatest system.
Correct. And they just actually approved 2 new scoring models that the lending world was supposed to start adopting here soon, but they kind of pumped the brakes on that. But the biggest change that we're seeing is going more towards trending data. So where they're going to put more weight on the behavior of the consumer in the last 24 months, as opposed to just a snapshot of what today looks like. So if you pay down your credit cards and the next day your utilization looks great, that's not going to maybe help you as much as in the future if you are primarily a person that keeps their cards maxed out. So that's another reason why working with an expert like Blue Water Credit, we stay up to date on what all the trends are, what the credit bureaus are looking at, what the mortgage people are looking at for a score, and so that we can customize a plan that's specific to that person.
Great information, and I highly recommend talking to our friends over at Blue Water Credit. They do a great job. They're not out there just to try and get the sale. They're looking at obviously they have to feed their family. I mean, there's no question about that, right? But the bottom line is that they're looking to see, what do you need? Does it make sense for you? Does it make sense for your family? Is it something that they can help with? And then you can decide whether there's a business relationship to be had or not. So I highly recommend talking to our friends over at Blue Water Credit.